Hey, okay, so today we're going to talk about critical numbers. So the whole point of us talking about this is so that we can eventually be really good at curve sketching, so sketching graphs. Before, we only graphed them and we didn't know how high up or how far down max mins were. Now we're going to know because now we know calculus. So we need to know what a critical number is. So a critical number of a function f is a number c in the domain. Okay, so that's important. So it has to, the number that you say is a critical number has to be in the domain of the function, such that either f prime of c equals 0, so the derivative, when you plug that number into the derivative, gets 0, or it's going to make the derivative not exist. Okay, so that's the definition of a critical number. Let's look at something graphically, okay? So here's a cubic. You are going to have a critical number here, and you are going to have a critical number here, because it's going to be where f prime of c equals 0, right? Slope of the tangent line at those points are going to be 0. And if you see, it goes from increase to decrease to increase. So that's how we're going to figure out what's going on when we're sketching. We're going to look for critical numbers, intervals of increase and decrease, and we're going to figure out what these points are for maxes and mins. So that's our objective. So let's just go ahead and do one example. We'll do a really simple example. So if I ask you to find the critical numbers, the first thing you're going to do is find the derivative and set it equal to 0 and solve for x. So I'm going to factor a 3 out here. Okay, so hopefully you agree that x equals 3 and x equals -1 follow this. F prime of c equals 0. If I plug 3 in my derivative, I would get 0. If I plug -1 in there, I would also get 0. Okay, so that follows that derivative and that definition, sorry, and 3 and -1 exist in this domain, because the domain of this is just XCR because it's a polynomial, okay? So now what do we do with this? So if I was asking for the critical numbers, you would tell me there's critical numbers where x equals 3 and -1. And then if I ask you what are the intervals of increase or decrease? So what you do is you actually set up a number line. So I'm going to put a -1 here and a 3 here. And what you're doing is plugging x values into your derivative to see if you get a positive or a negative number. The reason you're doing that, let's go back to that picture I drew earlier, okay? The slope of the tangent line when it's increasing is positive. The slope of the tangent line where it's decreasing is negative. So if I plug a point, let's say this is where x is -1 and this is where x is 3. If I plug a point, an x value, in the derivative here and I get a positive, it means it's increasing there. Okay? So I'm going to plug a point into the derivative, so -2. When I plug -2 into the derivative, I get a positive. I always pick 0 if I can, so I plug 0 into the derivative, I get a negative. Pick a number greater than 3 into the derivative, and I get a positive. So I actually have an interval. I have 2 different intervals of increasing. From here to here, so -infinity to -1, and 3 to infinity. And my interval of decrease is between -1 and 3. And notice that I'm using circle brackets. I can't use square brackets here because at that exact point, I am not decreasing. At that exact point, the slope of my tangent line is 0, okay? So then since I know that my graph, what happens when I go from increase to decrease? Basically, I'm asking you, is that a max or a min? Hopefully you know that that's a max. So a max happens when you have a change from increase to decrease. So I have a max where x is -1, and I need to get the y value. I plug it in the original questioning, because what I'm looking for right now is this actual point, okay? So when I plug that in the original, I get 32, and right here is a min. If you see, it changes from decrease to increase. So if I have a change from minus to a plus, I have a min value. So I have a min value where x is 3, and I plug x as 3 back in my original, because I'm trying to get a y value, and I get a y value of 0. So this question, I have a max and a min, an increase and intervals, increase, decrease, and critical numbers. So those are the important things to take out of that question.